parked on the curb. sorry.
Okay. I'm going to read the oath of office. I'll start when I say I. Everybody say their name and then just repeat what I say. And then I'll pass the forms around and each one of you will sign a form.
If you could have everyone stand, that'd be great.
Yep, and you have to raise your right hand. I, having been appointed to the office of Park and Recreation Board, with and for the City of Mitchell, Davison County, South Dakota, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of South Dakota, and the ordinances of said City of Mitchell, and that I will faithfully and impartially, to the best of my knowledge and ability, perform all the duties of the office of Parks and Recreation Board.
We have no delegations, is that correct? We're going to just reorder something here. We do have a couple folks from the Hockey Association here. So we are going to take E under Association Amendment Agreement and move it up right away. So we've got a lot of stuff to get through, so at least they can move on out of here after that discussion. So is there any other additions or deletions or modifications to the agenda? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended, moving the association agreement amendment up to the top here so we can tackle that right away.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the amended agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. So that means we will just go right to it.
Yeah, okay. In light of the incident we had at the ice arena, the city council met a couple of times and they came up with some amendments to the agreement, and you have that before you today. They've seen it and approved it, and we're just going to go ahead and have the board make it official today. That would be great. It's section 13A through F, and A through F is the additions. And Justin, do we have any other additions?
13A through F, and then also section 21.
Section 21 allows us to give 7-day notice.
Previously, we didn't have any language in there that dealt with what you do if there's a breach of the contract, so we felt it was necessary to add that language.
And then back to 13A, just asking that the locker rooms are supervised by a Safe Sports certified adult, and that keys will be available to those individuals, MSHA individuals. They'll be responsible for leaving the dressing room and be in a tidy condition. Locker rooms are not scheduled by the city, therefore the items inside are not if there's lost or stolen items, it's not a responsibility of the city. They must vacate the facility within 60 minutes after the day's final activities. If there's staffing required after that, we would recharge some overtime. That would be C. D would be responsible locker room behaviors required, and is of the utmost importance. No fighting, boxing, wrestling, bowling, throwing equipment, shooting pucks, etc. is allowed in the locker room at any time. E, MSHA is solely responsible for locker room behavior and issues while MSHA is using the facility. And then F, during these events, we're asked that children under 10 are accompanied by an adult of 18 and older. And that was everything that was agreed on by council, and we're just kind of ready to move forward with this, unless you have any questions or comments.
Is the plan to amend all of our agreements?
That's correct. Every agreement will have some behavior amendments to it.
And that'll be kind of as we rotate through them. We felt, since this is kind of an immediate response to the situation that happened, that the hockey one should be done immediately, but we'll be moving towards putting language along these lines in future agreements for other organizations, kind of as we go through the renewal process for each one of those. So they're on different cycles. I don't know which ones are coming up next, but some come in March, some come in August, and just kind of as we make our way through, they'll get renewed with this new language too.
I do want to add, and Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, hockey's the only one that has their own locker rooms where they store their stuff there, or what do you have at other places?
So, inside the ice rink, hockey's mainly the ones that use the locker rooms. Up to this time, they've basically left their equipment there throughout the entire week because no one else really uses those locker rooms. On the weekends when they're at games, all their stuff's gone, so if we have rentals on the weekend, people want to use that. There's no conflict. Figure skating does use the locker room here and there if they have boys, girls, whatever they need to. In other areas like baseball fields and soccer complex, there are no locker rooms on the softball, baseball fields. And as far as the Pepsi complex goes, DWU and Mitchell High School uses those. I have not really been aware of the Soccer Association. I don't believe they ever utilize those locker rooms that are out there. But we have separate agreements with DW and the high school for use of those.
So the agreements for the other clubs might be a little bit different. This is the one situation where we have kids possibly in a locked door room for long periods of time. We want to make sure that that's not happening and make sure there's an adult present at all times.
I don't know if this should be brought up here, but as long as we're talking about the hockey, was anybody on this board notified of this prior to the newspaper putting in? My question is, we were the ones, this board signed the original agreement, whether it had this in it or not, and we were not notified of what went down in our facility. Why is that?
Well, mainly the city council kind of took it over, so there was no reason to have a special meeting, but
Common decency would have said somebody should have notified every one of the board members when this occurred, not a week after.
We found out a couple of days after as well. But,
well, I mean, that's the issue I have. I mean, on a go-forward basis, this reads fine to me, but the bottom line is this board signs off on this with the particular associations, and even if it goes directly to the council and the mayor, this board should have been notified. Is that wrong?
I don't think there's a requirement that you would be, but I think it'd be a good
when we
practice
sign
to do
off
that.
on the agreements. I mean, we're the ones that set the agreements, and this board signs off on it, and then it goes forward. I mean, and we're the last to hear about it.
I found out in the paper too.
yeah.
Okay, that's all I have.
Yep.
I guess, I mean, I understand what you're saying there. I would agree that if there's a major incident like that and it becomes aware of staff, that should be alerted to the board. I would agree. I didn't know anything about it either. we'll have to make a process change for that type of thing, I would suggest.
And I don't know if it needs to be implemented directly into the ordinance.
Yeah, there's not,
Agreements.
it would be very difficult to contact the board every time there's a fight. You know, usually these are associations, and until you really know the extent of it, at that point, you know, we would get the information out if it was one of our programs, one of our facilities, but we don't monitor everything. So sometimes you may hear about it in the paper prior to us even hearing about it as well, which is kind of what happened in this situation. But council kind of took that over right away. So we just kind of kept it there, and I apologize for not getting an email out.
There's some level of discretion involved, obviously, but I agree. I think there should be some level of notification, assuming you guys think it's appropriate. But the council had taken over the discussions, I guess, and I didn't know anything about that either. Do you have any other questions, comments, concerns related to the amendments in these agreements? I mean, these were drafted by you, Justin, and apparently the association is agreeable to these amendments. And
Nate and I worked together on the initial draft, and then we worked back and forth with Doug Daly on behalf of Mitchell Skating and Hockey.
Okay.
So we've gone through a couple rounds of edits, and this is kind of what we're left with at this point, and after the council made their comments and recommendations too.
Okay.
Yes, I had a question about F. I mean, that seems a little, 13F, it says that children under the age of 10 must be accompanied by their adult the whole time.
Yes, that
Seems
doesn't.
a little excessive to me. I don't want to be walking my kid to the bathroom every time they want to go.
Yeah, that's not the intention of that. The intention of that is not to drop your child off. We have the same rules at the rec center up to a certain age. You have to be there with an 18-year-old. Kevin can actually fill you in on the actual ages there. But we have those in all of our facilities. You can't just drop off a child. You have to have an adult with them. As long as they're within the facility, but if we find them in an area that they shouldn't be, they would be returned to an adult or the guardian of that child. Hopefully that helps. So it's not like you have to follow them into the bathroom or anything. It's mainly just not dropping them off. We have guarded times where we have actually guards there, but at the ice arena we do not have that. Yep.
And I mean, I will add that in the past couple of years, I did look into codes of conduct, as they say, in pretty much every ice rink in the state of South Dakota and Minnesota, and pretty much everybody has more or less the same age requirements of unattended children from 8 to 10 years old, so that is pretty much a standard across the board for what the state does within their rinks and Minnesota.
Kevin, can you share the age requirement on open swim?
Yeah, well, just in general at the rec center, any child that's 8 and under or second grade and under, they have to either be accompanied by someone 14 or older or be in our after-school program, and then the rest can go into the gyms and things like that. But we also have full-time staff on duty, just like at the pools. We have staff there that supervisors.
Unlike that, the ice arena, we do not have necessarily will have the staff there. Might be one person there running the Zamboni or who knows what, but we want to make sure that they're not dropping children off.
Like open skate, though. I mean, isn't that kind of the intent of?
Dan, did you want to share your rules there?
A couple years back, again, the rules that I set in place for open skate and basically the building in general, because there are city employees there at all times, which makes that place a little bit different than the soccer fields where it's the associations when they have practice. We don't have a worker there. When I looked back at everybody else's rules on their code of conduct, the minimum age where they said you had to have some type of supervision was 8 years old. And in my wording on my code of conduct there is an 8-year-old has to have some type of supervision from somebody, a responsible person 14 and up. Whether it be they're friends, they know some people, you know, that's fine. I'm not going to sit there and hammer every single person. What I'm trying to eliminate are the kids that just get dropped off and they just run around the entire rink. When we have hockey games, those 5-, 6-year-olds that go to the other rink that is completely shut down and not being utilized, and they're running around the boards and over, or the random kids that are jumping on tables in the lobbies. That is, you know, I'm not going to go question a group of kids that are walking through the rink that are going to the bathroom or that aren't doing it. What I'm going to question is if I see a young child obviously in a place that they're not supposed to be, you know. And if it's going to be a 4-year-old, I'm not going to sit here and, whereas your parents is, what are you doing over here? Do you have somebody here you can watch? That, you know, there's give and takes, but we have at least some guideline to go by.
I mean, ultimately, the staff isn't there as babysitting service.
Right. You know, that's the rec center has an after-school program for if you need childcare.
Yeah.
I'm not set up to run a child care service. I have staff there to police the ice, to take admission, and I have usually a college-age kid there to resurface at night. That's not the intent of the ice rink. It's there for the transition time, yes, between school and other things, but at the same time, like I said, the rec center is the place. If you need childcare, if your child has to be supervised, the city offers that at the rec center.
Thank you. Any other questions or?
I just have a quick question on A. So basically, anytime the locker rooms are open, they're supervised?
That's correct. I should also add that the vast majority of this is the hockey, USA Hockey requirements, including A, which is already in there. We're just making sure that we're going to enforce it and goes in line with line 21, where we can, you know, close the facility if we need to do.
Anything else? I guess with that, I'd entertain a motion that to approve the amended facility use agreement between the City of Mitchell and the Mitchell Skating and Hockey Association.
So moved.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to. Do you guys have anything to add? If you have questions. So it's been moved and seconded to approve the amended facility use agreement between the City of Mitchell and the Mitchell Skating and Hockey Association. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Thank you. Minutes. We have a lot to get through today. Assuming everybody poured through the minutes of the last meeting before, I would entertain a motion to approve the December 13 minutes.
I'll second it.
We moved and seconded to approve the December 13th board minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Bills?
Okay, we'll go ahead and go through the bills. We have some new forms that we discussed last month. Stephanie's here to answer some questions if there's any there. But I'll do my best to answer your questions as well if you have any. I'll just go through the bills first. I think page 27 was the first page I had. There's a $9,200 bill for the water main break when we had Geotech come out and look underneath the concrete. That was an uninsured item because it's under the concrete. So, page 29, we had the $5,400 bill for roof repair. That's from our roofing problems we had at the ice arena back in April. Just came in late. page 30, Sandy Beach infrastructure for 46.9. We are actually done with that project. The Sandy Beach infrastructure is ready to roll for the restroom this year. Page 31, 7,100 for the Northridge restroom. Again, we'll be working on that project until it's complete this spring. Steve, I don't know if you wanted to update about it, where you're at.
I guess not much has gone on since last time. I think they're just waiting for nicer weather to work on the inside, all the plumbing, electrical.
Okay, and then when it comes to the accounting forms that you see in front of you, it starts on page 3, and I had Angel include page 1 and 2 as a handout today, so you should have that setting aside.
This second one, plus there is a page 3 here, it looks like. Is that what you're talking about?
Yep. Page 3 would be the revenue. Page 1 is the department, overall department. 1 and 2 is the overall department report. And then each page thereon would be either the campground or the recreation and aquatics is our programs and outdoor pool, not our indoor pool.
Which one do you want to look at first?
Okay, yeah, we can.
Let's just go through.
Where do you want to start?
Well, maybe this page 3 that's in the packet.
Okay, page 3 in the packet would be.
Is everybody there? So after the last bills, we get to it says page 3, top right-hand side, and then City of Mitchell revenue and expense report unaudited as of December 31st, 2018. Actually goes page 3 and then page 2 and then page 4, 5, and 6 apparently.
Okay.
Are we found? We want to start there, I guess, and explain what we're looking at.
Yep. So the current budget would be our projected revenue for the year. For the rec center, we were running off of the business plan. And as you can see, we're short on revenue. If you look at lines 34, 603, and 604 are both revenue for the rec center. That would include the new indoor pool. Our projection was 75% cost recovery. We came in at 72% since the pool opened, so we were pretty close. We were about $16,000 off. Here, the numbers are a little bit higher, but you'll also see in our expenses were also much lower than we anticipated, so it kind of evened out. We'll get to expenses here in a minute, but I'm just kind of giving you a heads up there. If there's anything else specifically that I can point out.
In the last meeting, there's still one set of claims that will probably be paid that will still be coded back to this budget. It would be items that were done in 18 that they checked us as mid-written. So you'll have one more final bill listing for 18 for the end of the year.
Do you know that amount of that bill?
I don't have that. I wouldn't know what they have to submit. It's whatever they submit for the next payroll or the next claims period.
If you go to page 1 on the handout, this give you an idea of where the department was overall. If you look down at revenue over and under and expenditures there, the budget balance would be $90,000. We would be able to go still into the hole that much from $2,335,708. And if you look down at the next item, it says other sources. $30,000 was transferred for the rec center pool flooding, which puts us at $120, which is good. We're sitting okay. We have about 52,000 total in outstanding bills for the Northridge restroom and the locker room remodel that hasn't been completed yet. but we're pretty much getting close to wrapping this up. This isn't at all our final bills yet. We'll get closer to that next month. If you go to the revenue from the campground, our revenue was $65,000. Our expenses were around $50,000. We had about $15,000 in extra funds there. We had a good year. So anytime our revenue is falling short, we will definitely work to keep our expenses down. Page 4 would be our recreation and aquatics. That would mean our programs and outdoor pool, not our indoor pool. So try not to get confused with that. We had a pretty good year. I think I might have these guys actually next month talk about their reports, because they'll be they're the ones that own this and own the outcomes of these budgets. But today I'll just go through and answer any questions you may have. We had a good year. If you look at the bottom there, there's $18,000 left in that budget. The next page, the rec center. Again, like I said, we had a lot of expenses left over in this budget, and if you look at the bottom under budget balance, last line, $112,000 in extra funds sitting in that line item. Sports complexes. I'm sorry, I've got the updated one from today, and there's $1,000 left in that account. It says it was under 3,000 here, but I have that there's $1,000 as of today. Page 7 would be the Parks Fund. Again, there's $98,000, but 26 of that is the Northridge restroom that we'll be transferring next year. And then the last one is the supervision budget. That would be mine and Angel's budget. We had $8,000 left in that budget. 4 of it was an insurance claim that we don't have, insurance bill that we don't have much control over. Yeah, please.
On your first page, I think one point, just because this is the first time you guys are seeing this reporting format, if you look at the financial summary page, it shows the budget balance for revenue.
Which page exactly?
This page 1, your park fund overview. It shows your revenue and expenditures.
Okay.
And it shows that you had $143,000 remaining in the revenue budget. That means that's where we were under budget in the revenue. But then you'll see in the expenditure budget, you have $233,000 left. So back to Brian's question from the last meeting, when you wonder what you have available for the next year to reallocate, would be the difference of those two. Because then you know you have the cash in your fund to cover the difference. If you would have gotten all of your revenue in and still had $233,000 of unspent expenses, you would have more to deal with next year. Nate saw the revenue projections, and so the expenditures were kept down, which is good, which means you will have some left over next year that you'll be able to repurpose for other things. I hope that I hope that's what you were kind of looking for at that last meeting. Like, how do you know what's left? It's the difference between what's in the revenue versus the expenditures, because the revenue is in the park fund. Hopefully that makes it a little bit clearer.
So of that 90,000, I have 52,000 in capital projects that we're still working on next year that we would subtract from that amount, leaving about 30 some odd thousand as of today.
and any unspent still stays in the park fund.
Thank you.
All right. The page 3 of the campground, which is towards the end, it has the campground expenses and revenue as well. And you can see under current year-to-date, we have $16,696 in profit for the campground. What happens to the campground money, Stephanie?
That's that question, I guess, does that go into a capital improvement fund?
Actually,
or that, or
the
how-
campground fund was set up as an enterprise fund, so that money stays specific to the campground fund as well. It's really very similar to the park fund. The only difference is enterprise funds have to be self-sustaining. They can't take a transfer. They're not supposed to take a transfer in from general fund. The park fund is a special revenue fund because we do transfer about $1.9 million from general fund to the park fund. But once it's there, it stays there. So whatever's the difference in the campground from the revenue to the expenditures stays there. And next year, if the board decides they want to invest in some kind of improvement in there and you have cash in that fund, you would have the latitude to do that. Does that answer your question? I know sometimes I get a little too technical with budget stuff, so I just want to make sure that that makes sense to everyone. Okay.
That was the last page that I have. I don't know if there's anything specific. You'll get used to it.
Can I do a question going way back to the very first page, page 3, inside the big packet?
Yep.
I'm not sure I'm reading or understanding or what exactly is going on. So this is a revenues, and when I go to the ice arena, prior years, we show a number of 168,442.
Yep, that was
this year. It's 28.
That was because hockey missed the deadline and made 2 payments that year.
Okay, so we have 2 years into
That's correct.
that. Okay,
And
so that's why that number is out of whack.
And that number is also incorrect as of today. These reports are a week ahead, and I'm going to bring the printed report that's as of today because we've got to get this out to the public.
I will say with that, it was either when I first started or right before hockey had asked if they could make split payments. So that's probably what you're seeing.
Factored into that.
As of today, the budget for the ice arena was $104,000, and we came in at $107,000.
Did that include all that messing around we ended up doing with humidifier, icing?
That's just the revenue. Yeah, his expenses, he broke even about. He had $1,000 left so far.
Your staff did an unbelievably good job monitoring that, where the revenue was this year and ensuring that the expenditures were in there so that your fund stayed in the positive. So it was really, really good.
I want to say that as well. I mean, the staff did a fantastic job, and like I said, I think I'll have them kind of give their financial report each month, and because they own it, they are the ones that are responsible for it, and they're doing a fantastic job.
Everybody's just soaking it all in. So, yeah, again, that goes back to there was something in the packet that had always been there, and we had some good questions on it last week as to, okay, why is it really there? And now we're changing that to hopefully provide more relevant and as up-to-date as possible information in here. So that was good. We need a motion, entertain a motion to approve the bills for sure, which was a few minutes ago now. Did I hear a second? Been moved and second to approve the bills. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same. And again, if anybody else, if you guys have questions on this and it's hard to soak it in all right here, feel free to go in and talk to Nate or Stephanie or whoever if you guys have questions and explain it. Not everybody's probably experts at financial reports. And when I first looked at this and I saw the revenue expenditure thing, it didn't compute with me being in a profit business versus in this public entity. It was just strange to me. So
We can lose money.
yes. When I first looked at it, I said, well, we have to close the doors tomorrow. So it looked odd to me. But now I'm beginning to understand it a little bit better. All right. We are moving on then to ordinance update and discussion.
Okay. How are we doing on time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We do have to, it turns out, we do have to do an ordinance change. If you look in 821 on the ordinance, first page of the ordinance there, second line, it says all species of ash trees are permitted. So we're kind of stuck doing an ordinance change with council one way or another. So what we did is we decided to go ahead and propose the changes that we felt were necessary. You look on page 2, we wrote those down for you. So on section 1, 821, it would say the Park and Recreation Board shall determine which species of trees are permitted to be planted. That way we're not putting species that we might not want on there down the road. Section 2, it's 8 and 15. I gave you some new information though. I'm going to give one back here to Justin. 15 feet might be a little too aggressive if you're looking at what other towns are doing, but it might be okay. It's kind of up to the board on where you guys want to set that. Currently it's set at 12. Steve will explain why he wanted it a little higher.
At first, we thought it'd be easier to set one height for all the streets, but then after re-going through with the sheet I handed out with all the different cities, a lot of them are still at 12 foot for residential streets, and then they got some truck routes that are 16 foot is what they have theirs set at. It's kind of a number up in the air. I know just typical height for a semi-truck and trailer is 13 foot 6. We get different deliveries, different companies throughout town like to move. Places that implement dealerships out west of town, they come through on Haven Street, got Spruce Street, Walmart, all that stuff. You know, there's different business everywhere. But
that would be based on, we're talking here residential.
yeah, and some of the campers nowadays are getting taller and taller.
But truth be told, let's talk Minnesota Street. No trucks are supposed to be on that street, and yet they do.
Yeah.
Ash Street, no trucks are to be on that street, but they do. My question being, if we were to up this to 18 feet or 15 feet from 12, what's the purpose of that?
Well,
I mean, in a residential area.
Yeah.
I mean, you either enforce the ruling of no truck route, or you don't.
Yeah, I guess I can't enforce that part of it.
No, I know, but I mean, but we're talking two different things. You know, Haven Street and Sanborn Street, that's one thing. But that's totally different than Minnesota Street and Ash Street.
Yeah, I've always...
But if we up it to 15, using your excuse for semis being 13.6, and you're probably right, you know, then we're just saying, then the trucks can literally go anywhere in the city.
Or we could change it just something different for the truck routes in town or something like these other cities.
Exactly.
That's kind of better to me.
But that goes back then, at least in my way of thinking, with what Nate's saying. The ordinance is not specific enough the way it currently is.
I will say that, Steve, the bucket truck clearance that we use is 13.6, correct? Or
Our
is it
bucket truck
12.6?
is 11'6" tall.
It's 11'6", okay.
Semi tractor trailers are
But
13'6".
we also have to keep in mind that within 6 inches of our bucket truck, which is a fiberglass system, 6 inches is very short to keep. So that's where I'm looking at it too. Just my opinion on things.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, the thing is with this, and I'm basing mine on what I currently am involved with, where I live and what happens in my area of the city, on the corner of obviously Minnesota and Nash. And I talked to Nate earlier this week about it, and we ran into a situation where we're addressing, based on this ordinance, Park and Rec is the ones that are determining who can do what to what. What I ran into was not Park and Rec. It was the street department. And I got up one morning, I'm sitting watching TV, watching the news, having a cup of coffee. My wife comes running out of our bedroom, through the house, and said, "They're not cutting our tree again." And out the door she goes. I go, "What is going on?" Well, I look out the window. I got 2 Michigan loaders sitting out there, 3 pickup trucks and a trailer, and no less than 6 guys, and they're looking at my tree. And they wanted to trim my tree. And my wife says, it's over 12 feet. That's what the ordinance is. Well, we've got to trim it because it's got to be a foot taller than our equipment. And the branch that, I'm not kidding you, I swear to God, they never touched the tree. But the branch they wanted to trim, they wanted to take about a foot off that was no bigger around than my finger. Now, that was before the snow hit. I went out there and talked to the guy. The guy in charge was a street department guy. And I said, are you street or are you Park and Rec? And he says, well, these 5 guys are street. The guy with the chainsaw is Park and Rec. And as it turned out, I knew who he was. I mean, we knew who he was. But the bottom line here is, my wife said, you trimmed it last year. And the response we got was, well, we don't know what trees we trimmed. So, I mean, it's basically come down to, they're just going to drive down the street, and if it looks like it needs trimming, they're going to cut it. And there was no advance notification.
Which street was it, Brian? The Minnesota side or your Ash side?
And that's not the first time. I mean, it happens all the time. Just drive down Minnesota Street, and on the street side, it doesn't matter whether it's on the East Boulevard or the West one, those trees are all completely, I mean, we used to be every year Tree City US or Tree City America for the city of Mitchell. We'll never get that again. Not if we keep operating the way we're doing.
Yeah, it'll take some better training with staff and other departments.
So if we up this footage from 12 to 15 or whatever it is, it's just going to open the door for more and more of the same. And I told the guy, I says, drive your Michigan under that. I want to see if it clears it. And he said, well, I can't. And I said, why? Well, this guy up talking to the driver. I said, you know. And at that point he says, we're on break. And they all take off. Well, I stood there watching it. Michigan went completely under the tree, never touched it.
We can keep it at 12, which might be the recommendation here. Just leave it at where it's at. Because if we do start talking about arterial and collector streets, we're going to have to define what that is next. So it's something to consider.
There are a number of campers that are over 12 feet tall. I mean, getting to be more and more. If I pull my fifth wheel down the street, it's going to hit trees somewhere, unless you drive in the middle of the road, basically.
Justin, is there a legal
well over 12
description of arterial streets?
I don't remember if we've got that built into our code or how we've got that considered.
I agree with keeping it at 12. I think when we go to 15, trees are a very personal thing for people in their yards, and I think we are potentially infringing on that. You could have a lot of upset people, and understandably so, if they're used to not having a camper on their street. You know, I understand the function and the reasoning behind going higher. I absolutely get that. I just think in a residential area, you change the look of the street when you start going to 15.
Yeah, and we don't have to go that high. It was just put out there. That's why the other sheet was added, so you can see what other cities are doing. You know, but a lot of the truck routes, they upped it a little bit higher. I don't think we need to go that high, is what these other cities have done, even on their truck routes.
So that my last question, I go a little bit short. Based on what you said, this ordinance is going to have to be changed.
The only thing that we have to change is the first line that says ash trees are permitted. Okay. If that's the recommendation here from the board. Okay. We keep that the same, but there was also we can get into the next section. Maybe we can go there real quick before.
The First Amendment is basically saying it's taking any designation of specific trees out of the ordinance, just referring to a list of trees, right? And
That's
then that
correct.
list can be fluid based, and that makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So we would change section 2, though, because that still says 15 feet.
Justin and I would change that if it's your recommendation to keep it at 12. We would just go back and not ask for an amendment to that ordinance.
And I guess it depends. We can maybe ask our city council member here what his preference would be. Is we can either remove that section before it's presented to council, or we can leave it in there and tell the council that it's been recommended that that part not be included.
I'm not 100% sure I understand. I mean, there are certainly streets where it needs to be more than 12, right? I mean, if we get on the, I guess the bypass isn't the cities, is it? That'd be a state thing, or it is. Maybe there isn't. Maybe there are state designations. Or what is a city street where it would definitely need to be? I mean, a semi's going down, and a semi can't go under 12.
We trim on Havens and Sanborn streets. You know, we do this on the maintenance of that.
Yeah.
I mean, in the future, trees on Burr Street.
And I didn't get a map yet. I was going to see if I'll get a map of what are the actual truck routes in the city of Mitchell. So one of the complaints I get is from Move Electric. They go down Burr Street all the time to their
right,
and then down
there.
7th and whatnot.
Yeah.
So.
And Foster Street, because of the Sheba and the hospital too, there's semis on there.
I didn't get a map yet.
So looks like we do have some definitions for arterial and collector in our code. I'm not sure that they're going to be particularly helpful for you guys, but our code defines an arterial street as a principal traffic artery more or less continuous across the street, which acts as a principal connecting street with state and federal highways and includes each street designated as an arterial street on the major street plan. So, and I'd give you the definition for collector street, but it's equally as helpful. What I'm guessing is that Public Works probably has a map of these and what they consider to be collector and arterial, and they'd probably be able to provide that and reference it in the future. But I don't know which would qualify as which now, based off these definitions.
So if I'm looking at the thing you handed out, it looks like Mitchell and Pierre are the only two that leave it. No, Rapid City.
Aberdeen, Rapid City, Sturgis.
Well, Aberdeen's already at 16, though.
Oh, yep. Sorry about that. And Sturgis and Custer at 14.
Right. And so Rapid, Pierre, and Mitchell are the only ones that are less than. Right? Yeah, less than 16, effectively, for the arterial and collector streets. got 14 feet in Custer and 14 in Sturgis.
Twelve's a good for neighborhoods. I do agree with that.
So
do we want to add language for an arterial street?
yeah, not knowing what they are, I guess it's tough for me to.
I would
say that.
assume that it's more like your Havens, Burr, Sanborn.
Is there it's just somebody decides that, or there's a map that shows that, or how?
Can we do?
This is just my assumption, but I'm trying to remember back to conversations I've had with the Public Works Department, but I'm fairly sure that they have a map and they're designated within that department. I just don't know for sure which streets are on which list.
Well, all the ones that we mentioned are 4 lanes too, so that might be a way to look at it.
Okay. Well, that would make sense.
Except for Foster. Bird, part of Bird instead of.
Yeah, but we could.
So 4 lane would get, in theory, quite a few of them.
Yeah.
But we have, there's those outliers of Foster. I'm sure ones we aren't even thinking of right now.
Sure.
Maybe we need to get the map, let alone when's the last time was that map even updated from street department or whoever else either. We might want to take a look at maybe obviously modifying or adding certain streets because if the map was how many years ago, society's changed.
That designation sometimes also impacts whether they can use the state funds on the maintenance and their
Correct.
reconstruction of the roads
So
too.
it
So
is a-
it's somewhat
Significant.
Yep.
Carries some weight.
It's not just an arbitrary map.
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess what I need from a board is our recommendation would be 15 feet for an arterial street and 12 for a neighborhood.
I think that seems like a reasonable compromise. It's 15 and 16 on all of these other ones, minus the Sturgis and Pier and Custer being 14.
If that's the way that the board wants to see it with the breakdown for your standard versus your arterial and collector, I mean that's a simple enough change that we could make before it goes to council. But I'll let you guys decide on which way you want to go before we figure out new language.
I think it has to be that way. All streets are not the same, and traffic is not the same on all streets.
Okay. And then section 3, real quick, we'll go through that while Justin's here. The original, I'm going to pull up the original. If you look at the original ordinance, 824, it basically says a dangerous tree is to be removed by the homeowner, and the cost should be incurred by the homeowner. The way we wanted to divide it up so that way we could either maintain what we're doing right now, and so we don't have to make any changes, is to split the property tree and the boulevard tree into 2 separate paragraphs. In the property tree, the full price would go to the homeowner if you hire a tree service for a dangerous tree, and then the boulevard tree, the board could choose a 50% reduction in fees or no fee like we're currently doing, or any of the above. And I included those fees as well into this packet. Looks like this right here. The average cost to remove a tree without labor is $228. With labor, it was $682. A 50% cost share would be $341. Or because we are doing an ordinance change, we could theoretically just maintain what we're doing today and make no changes at all.
All right, to see if I understand what you just said there. Basically, as far as the ordinance is concerned, you're stating the previous ordinance doesn't
define the boulevard tree.
Just says a property tree.
That's correct.
Okay, so you're expanding that to define that there's two different things.
Yep.
Property being on private property, the other one being within boulevard.
That's correct.
Okay.
So I can clarify a little bit here. So if you're looking at the actual ordinance language that should be included in your packet, under section 3, it talks about 824 of our code.
Yeah.
If you look at section A under that,
Yeah.
that's the exact same language that's there now. So that section would not be changing.
Okay.
That's the part that deals with trees that are actually on somebody's private property.
Okay.
So section B is a new section that specifically deals with your street trees, which
Okay.
are between the property line and the center of the road.
Okay.
And it's giving the flexibility under that section to allocate those costs differently. It's not saying that those are just purely the property owners. It's saying that the board can set the rate for what those property owners are going to get charged. So that's where the board would make a decision on whether it's going to be the property owner paying for the whole thing, or a 50% cost share, or some nominal fee, or nothing at all. That would be a board decision,
Right.
and we wanted to get the board's opinion on that tonight as well, so that the council knows what the board's intending to do with that fee.
Anybody have any questions on that particular explanation of that section?
Well, I think last month we ended up, and we were talking apples and oranges. I mean, but we thought they were all the same. That the property owner, trees on private property were the same as what trees in boulevards were. And you can't treat those the same way. Number one, my personal feeling is if it's on my personal property, it's my cost.
Yeah.
But I also look at it from the standpoint, if it's on a boulevard, I'm in basically a partnership with the city of Mitchell. If I plant a tree there and I maintain it, and I maintain the sidewalk that I have virtually no control over, and the boulevard, I plant grass, and I take care of the trees, and then the city decides, okay, we don't want trees in the boulevard anymore. So you've got to cut that tree down, and you've got to stump it out, and you've got to replant your grass, do all of that. And that's just because the city said we had to do that. Not because we were in partnership, it's a dictatorship over that. And that's never happened. And that's what I guess I made a statement about it last meeting, simply because it's a partnership. I'll do my part, let the city do their part. I mean, I'm not going to pay $650 to cut down a boulevard tree and have the city do it. I'll probably go contact a tree trimming service and probably get a cheaper rate if that's what I'm going to have to do. But what we've done up to this point is zero. And I would recommend, and Nate recommended at the last meeting, $25. And I would accept $25 to remove a boulevard tree. If the city wants us to put a dollar amount in there, I would be for doing that. That's $1. But, for us to sit here and determine, okay, the tree is like 60 feet tall. Well, number one, it probably wouldn't stand up to this if it was that big. But that being said, I mean, why should the property owner, it isn't even on his property. I mean, from the inside of the sidewalk out to the backside of the curb is considered city-owned property. They have control of it.
Yeah. My understanding of reading this, which could be wrong, is basically if the city deems it has to come out for some reason, whether it be sidewalks or some sort of work, it's the city's expense to take it out. And the partnership comes in that basically, you can buy the trees real cheap, right? So you can put them in the boulevard, and it's the homeowner's responsibility to see that the tree lives. And if the tree lives, well, nothing ever happens. If you decide you just don't like that tree anymore, it's not the city's responsibility to take that out. You can take it out. If the city decides that that is a hazardous tree or it died and maybe it was my fault because I didn't water, whatever it may be, or the ash borer got into it. Then, what we had significant discussion on, you're right, the last meeting was what a charge would be. I'm not sure you explained this charge thing in detail, but basically what it was arrived at on this spreadsheet, if you go to what this thing looks like, was the only thing, if we were going to come up with a rate based on basically the size of a tree, you can see the left-hand side is its diameter. So that's, about as simple as it can get. You go out, wrap something around it. It is 18 inches in diameter. Now it may be 30 feet tall. It may be 12 feet tall. I don't know. But there's no arguing that it's 18 inches around. And so you're basically saying that essentially equipment cost to remove an 18-inch average 18-inch diameter tree would be about $228. If we add the labor in that, it'd be about $682. So that'd be all of the city's labor and equipment. And so those are kind of options, I guess, that we could consider. And then the third option, I think, was where Marty had kind of suggested was, okay, well, maybe we split the difference with the homeowner at that point on the removal of that boulevard tree. And that's what option 3 would be. Does that make sense? Going saying, well, that's a 60-foot tall tree or it's a 57-foot, that obviously doesn't work. And this is averaging things out. There's going to be 18-inch trees that are much easier to take out than some other 18-inch tree, but at the end of the day, averages out to something that is easy for, I think, Steve and his guys to figure out, okay, how much should it be? Does that make sense on where that conversation was from last time? So that's the charging conversation. My understanding was we all arrived at last time is we should have some sort of charge closer to what our actual costs are. The $25 thing was, well, it took us more to mail out a bill, collect a bill, and deposit the check than $25. So that was where you drafted these options up, was on that direction.
That's correct. And if you take labor out, the expenses only would be less than the 50% cost share, slightly less. I guess I should point out in the packet also the door hanger that I put in there as well to give you an idea of what it would look like. They would get a door hanger similar to this right here. It'd have the ordinance written on the back. We would let them know what needs to be done on their tree and what we plan on doing, and give them the option to remove it within a certain amount of time or to trim it up, whatever it is that we're asking them to do, which is something we haven't done in the past. What's the warning system now?
I guess there's really no warning system unless they contact us first to come look at a tree. But we send a guy around every fall to mark dead trees or dangerous trees. Then usually we put the pink dot on there. And if they have a question or concern, they call us. But a lot of times everybody's at work. You can't get a hold of everybody. But with this, at least we have a better option. They can contact us.
We would fill this out, leave it at the door, send them one in the mail as well. Angel would keep track of that and contact them. And if we don't, we would send it over to enforcement if we don't hear back, or if we have to go out and trim it ourselves.
But they would mention last roughly how many trees you take out roughly every winter in the boulevards?
It varies from 80 to 110. Well, I guess boulevards be less. That's including parks. So I'd say around 60 to 75.
Last year we had 115 total.
Yeah, that's parks included.
Parks included, yes. Well, 60 to 75 boulevard trees.
We're talking boulevard.
Yep.
And again, if it's a dangerous tree on property, so a neighbor calls, says there's a dead tree, we're worried it's going to fall on our house, we would let them know that that tree needs to be removed. And if it doesn't, we would hire a tree service to come out. We wouldn't actually go out and take out that tree. And that would be up to the board, according to the ordinance.
One question on your removal rate calculator here then. 10 years from now, some future board is looking at this and says, whatever, $341 isn't near enough. Is there some sort of built-in, inflation adjustment, or how will this live, or it'll just get revisited over time? Or
We do track the expenses, so we would know if our expenses increase, and we could,
so just go through the fees, just like we do fees for everything.
That's
basically
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the fee change discussions that we have on an annual basis, it would be an item.
It would be an item that goes into that, yes.
So up until this change, prior to this, the 115 trees you took out of Boulevard this year was taken care of off of what budget? I mean,
It's just in our parks budget. Do you have a forestry? You don't have a forestry line item, no.
No, we don't have a forestry budget.
Just their general maintenance budget.
but some of them we actually picked up the cost of somewhere, right?
Yeah, it's just been in our regular operating budget, maintenance budget.
I guess I'm looking at the standpoint of ultimately it's the taxpayer that's flipping the bill, regardless of the going rate.
Yeah, one way or another. Yeah.
So, it's not like we're losing money by doing this, the way it's currently given, at zero.
Yeah, and that's an option.
It could be treated as a budget item, correct?
Yeah.
For forestry. That way the entire city would pay, for just specific homeowners.
I have a question for Marty. Have you had any feedback on our fee discussion of our last meeting? I have had 0. Have you had any?
I haven't had any. Oh, Brian.
Yeah, I have had none. Other questions? So the notification thing looks great to me procedurally. That would be much better than what we are doing now, I would believe. If we circle way back around, I guess, to where we started, to try and figure out what we want to do with this ordinance then. From what I understand, section 1 of this ordinance, we are in agreement. So that was basically the removal of the specific tree language from the ordinance itself and just refer to the list. Section 2, we arrived at 12 foot for streets other than arterial and collector. And we had talked about it.
Are we going to find out what arterial and collector are?
Yes, we'll use the map that the city has through the public works. That's what you would be agreeing to, is their map of those.
But we don't define them. Somebody else defines what arterial and collectors are. I don't know anything about what arterial and collector. I just know some streets are.
It would give our
tree
tree guys an idea of where they go higher, where they stay lower, instead of what we're currently doing, which is anything above 12 feet, I think.
Melanie, you had commented on the 12 in residential, 15 feet for arterial and collector. It seems reasonable. And then, so now we're down to section 3. That is, A is exactly what is in the ordinance today. So that stayed there. B added basically the clarification to define boulevard trees, which was not in the existing ordinance. Correct?
That's correct. And then C, the section C actually defines dangerous tree, which we also wanted to do as well.
Okay.
Do we have anything that clarifies what a sick tree is? Or, do we have any, what if somebody says the tree is fine, somebody else says, no, it's not? Is there any sort of training or anything like that?
that gets a little more touchy, and
Well, it's going
usually
to
by that time
it's going to when the homeowner has to pay.
Yep, it's pretty much gets to that point. Usually the tree's dead by now,
Okay.
and a lot of people don't really want to treat their tree because of the expense. And you can have a tree, you know, also next day lose its leaves. You know, it can come on pretty fast. Some come on kind of slow. We don't have anybody on staff that's good at tree diseases or anything like that.
I'm just saying potentially a training or something to give some validity to what you guys may be saying.
Yeah.
Well,
Usually by the time they call us, it's usually dead by then.
I brought it to Steve and one of his employers that if he was interested in studying and getting registered or certified as an arborist, yes and no. He was, you know, the time it takes. And I said, I would hope to think that the city and the park board would agree to pay for the training. If somebody wants to be a licensed certified arborist, I think that would be a great advantage to the park and rec department.
The only thing
To go against, to go, if there's a problem with a landowner that won't remove a tree that is diseased and hazardous, he says it's not, we say it is because we have an arborist and so does he, or we don't. Now it's going to be a peeing contest between whatever. I'm just thinking if we can train somebody, that would be great. It's going to happen.
Yep. The only thing I'll have to check into, which I haven't done at this point, is if an arborist salary is higher than what we currently pay our employees. I don't know.
I know you've had arborists before, isn't that right?
We used to, yeah.
They came and had the certification.
And did they get any extra pay?
Not at that time, but it wasn't required. He just had it.
Were they a foreman though?
Yeah, he was a foreman.
That's correct, and we don't have an additional foreman position.
Well, if somebody's willing, whether we get a raise in the salary, if somebody's willing to do it, wouldn't we want to maybe pay for a couple $300 worth of training if they would be willing to do it? Because I know a friend of mine, who you know I'm talking about, is just got certified, who has a tree cutting business, and it's to his advantage. So I just could see it's going to happen if and when we do get a diseased, you know, the diseased trees here, that, you know. And the next question I was thinking of too was future here, looking into the future, when the ash borer, if and when it does show up, and he's in a neighbor's backyard that doesn't want to get rid of the trees, who's going to be? Is it going to be the park and rec? Your job to go around through the alleys and check these out, or will it fall under nuisance property?
They would be complaint driven. If we got a complaint, we would go check it out. I mean, that we wouldn't, without a forester.
Would not the compliance officer of the city, that could be the one that would do that?
It's possible. I'd have to talk with Public Works about that. I think, yeah, it's very possible. But it would be complaint driven. We don't, what he was saying is they had a forester that was a foreman that actually was year round and was able to, you know, you get a phone call, he can go out there and take care of it. If we get a phone call at certain times of the year, I don't know, how do you deal with that?
It's just myself or Brad, my foreman now, that we go out and look at. He's got a background in horticulture, so he's got pretty good background in it, but not everything for trees.
All right, so to keep moving forward here on these ordinance changes, do I need to repeat what we had been through there, or is everybody okay on our amendments to this ordinance? Basically what we're saying again is, first one, we're taking out the specific tree references. Second, section 2, we are leaving it at 12 feet on streets, moving it to 15 feet for arterial and collector streets. Section 3, we are adding the definition of the boulevard trees. And section C, we're clarifying hazard trees. Correct.
That's correct.
I have a question about section 1. The very last sentence, you said something about the tree must be approved by the Park and recreation director in writing. So how long is that going to take? You know, are we used to have, I don't know, I guess, how's the process going to work?
That seems interesting.
Yeah, I think Justin added that language, so I'm not sure what he was thinking there.
I would agree.
But I can look into that.
Yeah, what it should be saying is that it's can't be planted unless it is on that list. Yeah. I'm pretty sure you're not going to approve every single planting that happens in the boulevard in the city of Mitchell, right?
Stephanie's not here either.
Well, with that Retree Mitchell program that we do have, they contact me. I go measure, make sure it meets all the right criteria,
Right.
and the spacing, as far as back behind the intersection, stuff like that. Then they get my approval, for something like that. But we get people all the time that just plant their own trees that never really come to the park for it.
Yeah, I don't think it's as long as they have approval from our department, that covers that. I think that's what he's thinking.
Yeah, to me, it should be worded differently. It should say no person or entity shall plant a tree unless, how did I have
We
that
could say
worded in my
department.
head? It just needs to refer back to that. Yeah, is on the list, shall not plant a tree unless it's on the list that's approved.
They still have
Or
to.
that has not been approved by the Park and Recreation Board effectively.
Yep. We can change that to board.
Yeah. No person or entity shall plant a street tree until the proposed streets. That's location too. That's still too specific.
The location, we have to identify the location because they have to be, otherwise they'll be putting them near a stop sign
Sure.
or not far enough away from the other tree. And ash trees need to be a certain distance apart because we don't want. We wouldn't be planting ash trees, but some of those disease trees would. The disease spreads faster if they're just
Too close
clumped together. Is what I'm getting at.
All right, so that needs to be modified, yes. Good catch. Anything else as it relates to that? Will this get circulated back around then, or is this going to come back to the next meeting, or what? You seem to have made significant changes here.
The only thing, there's two things that we need is a recommendation from the board to the council for the changes that we have, and also for what fee you feel that you would go after once we have the ordinance.
Right. So this ordinance is saying there will be a fee.
Yes.
And it says that there is a fee today. That's
Yes.
the existing ordinance. So what action on this then? It just needs to come back, or what? What is the plan here?
I'm
not sure we're at a point where we can, still needs to be reworded.
Probably table
Well, that first part needs to be reworded significantly.
Yeah, just the recommendation here. If there's if everyone's kind of in agreement here, I think that's all I need.
I think we're there on all of the changes, basically.
Is there any objections to anything that we've talked about, other than we'll talk about the fees here in a minute? But
yeah, we'll keep the rates away from it.
Yeah, this is just the ordinance.
Yeah, that's a separate.
And what I have is to clarify the language, not necessarily the director, but the board or the department. 12 and 15 feet. A, B, and C on section 3 we're all okay with.
Yes.
And any objections? Then we'll take that as a recommendation, and I'll.
Yeah, the only thing that I would recommend that I would like to see anyway is, as Ryan indicated, the street department has a map identifying arterial and collector. I would really like to see that, because basically we're putting it into the ordinance, and I have no idea. I mean, I'm assuming, Havens and Sanborn, but I don't know. I mean, all I know is in the Minnesota Street, there's a sign that says no trucks. But that doesn't mean it couldn't be an arterial. And that would determine whether or not I would vote in
issue is we don't have any input over what's an arterial or a collector street, we don't have the expertise to do that. So even though we may not think it's arterial, there's other things that define that it is that we have no control over.
The question is whether or not I would vote for 15 feet on specific streets.
Sure. And I think there's bigger things in that definition. It sounded like related to funds and who owns infrastructure and things than just trees. So
I'll mention there was one concern about defining arterial streets. So.
Just give us a map.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, well, yeah, I can
That's
send
all
that
I'm
over.
asking.
Yeah.
I
But
wanna see it.
do you want me to do that before I go to council with this, or do you want me to? Oh, okay. That's what I need to know.
all right, and that's good. Yeah, that should get out to everybody so we know what it is if somebody asks.
Get through the
list, the tree list. Okay, so
there's no change.
Swing to the very small print listing of trees.
Yeah,
Got
sorry
some
about
blue
the small
headings.
print, but I wanted to get it on 2 pieces of paper here, or one. Basically, there's no change to the current permitted trees except for the last line, which says all ash trees are not permitted as a street tree. Everything else is the same. I cleaned it up to make it easier to understand. It'll look better online, but we also checked out power-friendly trees. We can put a check mark next to those as well, so people can look for those if they need them. But these are the trees that are permitted, and then the last section would be the trees that are not. And the only thing that we've changed to our current one, assuming our current one was approved by the board in the past, all ash trees.
Nate, on a go-forward basis, my question, a street tree is determined to be a boulevard tree?
Boulevard tree, parking tree,
Okay.
or street tree.
My question is that one of those things where, we don't want to find an hole in a boulevard? Because then we go back to the overhang of the city and, why would
Things
we not
falling
just,
on the ground.
why would we not just determine any boulevard tree or street tree?
Well, I
would
would.
be the smaller variety tree.
Not every street tree has a sidewalk, so that if
Every street that's got curb and gutter in the city Mitchell will have a sidewalk.
but they can pull it off. I think it's up to 12 feet. They can plan it within that if they have no sidewalk.
I know, but
Yeah.
we're sitting here regarding the overhang and cutting, this, and we're over the sidewalks and this and that. So we already obviously have an issue. So why would we not try to eliminate that issue by not allowing humongous trees in the boulevard?
You're going to have trees that overhang the sidewalk or street no matter what type of tree it is. It just matter how it's trained and trimmed from the start when it's young to grow. That's a lot of the problem. People haven't trimmed or trained their trees right from the start. That's why we get so much overhang, so much things that are in places where they shouldn't be, as far as trimming not the right clearance.
If I understand, we want large trees in the boulevard, right? I mean, that's the canopy.
Yep, it helps shade
That we
the
want.
streets. It keeps them cooler.
Right.
It slows, the rain, the runoff down,
Right.
as it falls, type of thing, erosion. So they got the benefits of being there.
Yeah.
Sometimes, there's different.
And we don't want the same tree planted all over town.
No, there is no more canopies, hardly at all.
I know, and we have another round of disease possibly coming. Hopefully we do our best to get encourage people to use our free tree program. And
So what do we need a motion to basically approve this?
the street tree list, that's
and
correct.
the only changes that we've added,
Ash trees is
all ash trees. That's the very last line on the trees that will not be permitted as street trees.
in effect. By doing this, we would have to change the ordinance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which we're,
Yes.
So I would entertain a motion to approve this updated permitted street trees list.
Pending the ordinance change.
Okay. Again, the only change is we added ash to the end of it.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the amended permitted street trees list. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same?
Aye.
Okay. I have a hard stop in 7 minutes.
So this fees is I need a recommendation.
You want to go to fees? So back to this page.
You can have
Yellow stripe.
as many options as you want. I just was trying to help out with.
Right. So this is what we
Yep.
told you to come back with from the last meeting. At which time I understood we were pretty much in agreement that there was some sort of cost share, some sort of more true expense to what it was instead of we're doing nothing now, but we're supposed to be charging something. I'm kind of liking option 3, which was kind of along Marty's lines of thinking at the last meeting, which basically is we're sharing the cost to remove that hazardous tree. Correct?
That's correct. And if you go back to the door hanger, that would not include anything that would be damaging. The reason, if you're taking it out because it's damaging sidewalks, or you're doing a utility installation or a sidewalk installation, we wouldn't charge. We would just remove the tree because that's not a dangerous tree situation. So this is only dangerous trees.
And again, this goes back to a simplified way of determining based on diameter.
This is for further discussion on another point, but I just had a thought in terms of a disease tree, that if, as an idea, if the homeowner got the city to treat it or attempt to treat it, and then it still died, then maybe the city pays for that at least for a smaller proportion, but at least there's some sort of reward system for trying to treat the tree first or something. I don't know, it's just kind of an idea that came to me, but something to get people to try to treat the trees we have, and then if it still dies, then maybe there's a greater pickup by the city or something percentage-wise. I don't know, just a random idea. I'm just trying to get more people to try to treat the trees we have.
Yep, we would have, and we need to be notified if it's being treated, so we don't mark it for removal.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
So
Well, and so that process change would help
that process would change, yes.
There
Yeah,
isn't
so we would
just
work with the
something showing
homeowner,
up.
and that's
Yeah.
a different
So we
different
can at
issue.
least have some dialogue.
So the process would change.
That's correct.
Yeah, so that would be worth noting for sure.
Yep.
Any other input on these options here, 1, 2, 3, as it relates to these fees? I mean, this is a fee schedule. Nothing? Option 3? Is that yes, no's, maybes?
The only other thing is, going back to Brian, I understand is the taxpayers are obviously paying for the budget, which we all know that's where the money comes from. The other option is taking a look at option 1, which is a lesser of the evils, so to say, just the fact of labor-wise, we're going to pay for that staff no matter what. Either they're out cutting trees or they're going to be doing something else for the park and rec, or I don't know. You know what I mean?
That's right.
So maybe taking a look at just the expenses, which is something that we need to recoup, but the labor is going to be there no matter what. If we don't have them doing that, they're going to be doing something else. I don't know, but you know what I'm saying? So maybe that's another way to lessen that, lessen
open to
the
that
taxpayers'
too.
property, but
Yeah.
it covers our true expense,
Yeah.
because labor is going to be there no matter what.
Good point. So that pushes us to option 1, basically. I have no problem with that.
Left-hand column, I mean, obviously every dollar is something to every person or individual in our community, but the numbers, I guess, when I look at it, don't get too crazy on anybody out there unless it's a really, really huge tree. But I'll tell you one thing right now, the price that I see here, if you were cutting down a 30-inch tree or a 36-inch tree, and you hired it out, you're going to pay way more than what the
3 to 4 times
tree
that,
down.
probably.
I think it's, you know, I mean, I would be calling you if my tree is dying. I'm calling the city first before I call anybody else, because that price is cheap.
The other thing that Marty brings up here with his solution, or going with option 1, is if we are charging for labor, like the 50% cost share, people are going to be analyzing how hard those people are working. Do we have too many guys out there? You know, like,
True.
and so if we
I
go
agree.
with option 1, then it's just, this is what it costs.
All right.
We're not having to have file, you know, complaints on labor.
And I do want to add another thing. This isn't, because the way that we wrote the ordinance, this isn't set in stone. So if we have a disease that does come to town and the board wants to do it at no cost and clear cut for people, you can do that as a board at that time. So this can change and you can update as conditions change and over time.
Okay.
Which we don't have right now. We're kind of stuck.
So basically, I'm hearing I would entertain an option to adopt the proposed tree removal rate under option 1.
I'll make a motion. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
I will.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the fee removal using the option 1 schedule as in this attachment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same.
Aye.
What else do we have to get done? Because I need to walk out.
We're all good. Or our reports, but yeah, we're good.
Thank you.
Anything else for anybody? Then I have to leave.
It's just the reports. I
Yeah,
don't know
the
if
reports
there's-
that were in the packet. So, all right. One with that,
We're good.
good to adjourn. Thank you.
Your wife's doing it.
I don't know if that happens, but we'll have to get a map. So, yeah.